All right, for this week's story, probably my all-time favorite Olympian. If I was going to get a back tattoo of an Olympian, it would probably be this one. And that's why today we're going to do the story of Athena. So Athena is one of that younger generation of Olympians. She was not around at the beginning. But this story doesn't even start with Athena. It starts with Zeus's wife. Now I know what you're thinking. A lot of stories start with Zeus's wife, but this time I'm talking about a different wife. Because there's a reason why Hera didn't want to marry Zeus to begin with. Other than the fact that she could probably see what was coming down the road with how loyal and faithful he would be, she was actually his second wife. If you rewind your brain all the way back to those first stories, remember that Cronus was eating his kids one by one, munch, 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 as they were born. And his wife Rhea was getting pretty darn depressed over the fact that all of her children were getting eaten. And Gaia came to her with a plan for how her most recent child could escape and then grow up to be strong enough to overthrow the father. So Rhea and Gaia came up with a plan, but they had an accomplice, and that accomplice was the Titaness Metis. Metis was the one who smuggled baby Zeus out of the building. Metis was the one who gave Cronus the drugged wine. Metis was pretty key in that whole plan. And that's why, as a reward, when it was all said and done, Zeus married Metis. Partly as a reward for her service to him and his brothers and sisters, but also because Metis clearly was a player. She was the goddess of forethought. She was great at looking ahead, seeing problems, and solving them. A great woman to have as your queen. And Zeus is pretty happy with Metis as a wife. And he was so happy that he wanted to know what the future was, so he went to the oracle to see the future. And it ended badly, like it does every single time some king goes to the oracle. And the oracle told Zeus, if your wife has a son, that son will do to you what you did to your father and what he did to his father. And as you'll recall, that means attacking, possibly killing the father and taking over. This bummed Zeus out. He did not like this idea at all. So he returns home to Mount Olympus. And his wife meets him at the gates and says, husband, I have great news. I'm pregnant. And Zeus said, that's great. You're pregnant. And he started to worry. A lot. And he thought about how to handle this problem. And normally he would go to Metis to get advice, but it was a problem getting advice from Metis because, she was the problem here. So instead, what Zeus did is he came up with a plan on his own. And here's what it was. One day as they were relaxing in the throne room, Zeus turned to Metis and said, I'm so happy to have you as my queen, because I really value your counsel, and even though you're not as powerful as me, you're still quite powerful. And Metis said, excuse me? Like, yes, I mean, I am the most powerful, but, you're still, you're one of the Titans, so you're pretty good. She said, no, wait. My magic is some of the original magic. You are strong, but I have power. It's like, oh, sure, you have power. It's like, no, what do you mean power? No, I have power. Acknowledge it. If it wasn't for me, and it's like, yeah, I know you helped out with that whole situation. Thanks for that, by the way. I've said thank you before. But, I'm talking about power. No, my magic is just as powerful as yours. Okay, well, then let's prove it. Shall we have a little contest? A little friendly competition? Fine, name it. How about shape-shifting? Great, we'll shape. What are the parameters? What are we doing? Whoever can turn into the smallest creature wins. You're on. Great. So he turned into a dog. She turned into a cat. He turned into a rat. She turned into a mouse. He turned into a cricket. And then she turned into a fly. And then he turned into a frog and swallowed her. Done. So he ate his wife because, couldn't let her go around having sons because that would be dangerous. Is the only reasonable solution. Which might explain to you why Hera was not enthused about being his bride. But time rolls on. Things happen. He gets married. It's not happily married. There's adventures. There's wars. But one day, Zeus is sitting on his throne and he starts getting this pounding headache. Oof, and just like this, thump, 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 thump in his head, and it's killing him. And he tries to ignore it. And being a god, he's not actually that used to pain. But the thumping continues, just thump, 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 thump. And it is getting louder and harder and heavier. His head is just literally pounding. And pounding goes on day after day after day. And first it just distracts him. And then day after day, as it keeps going, it begins to annoy him and irritate him. And he can't sleep, and he can't focus, and he's getting angrier and angrier and angrier until finally Zeus starts to lose it. He hulks out. He starts lashing out right and left. Lightning bolts are streaking across the throne room. Pillars are getting knocked over. Walls are getting kicked in. The entire palace is shaking, and all the gods realize we've got to do something. And there's something that they do. They dogpile on him. Every single Olympian, plus a couple extras that they could recruit to come on up, they all dogpile on Zeus and haul him down to the ground. And it takes all of them to take him down. But just barely they're able to do it. And they are struggling as he thrashes. And he's spitting and screaming and shouting. And that's when one of the strongest of the Olympians gets up. Hephaestus gets up and walks out of the room. And Ares and Poseidon and Hades have to exert all the strength to make up for the lack of Hephaestus being there. But Hephaestus walking away was part of the plan. Because what he did is he walked to his workshop. And he looked along the wall. Pulled down his heaviest hammer. Another his sharpest, heaviest chisel. And he goes back to the throne room with both. And as his family holds down his father, Hephaestus looks Zeus in the eye and says, "This is going to hurt you more than it hurts me, father." And he places that chisel right up against the center of Zeus's skull, and he lifts the hammer and he strikes it as hard as he can. And blow after blow after blow, he pounds against that chisel until finally Zeus's skull cracks open. And as everyone rolls away from Zeus, with his skull now split wide open, what they witness is a woman. A woman fully grown, in full armor, with spear in hand, ready to fight, step out of her father's skull. Because this was Athena, the gray-eyed. And she came out ready to fight. And everyone had to scramble to get out of the reach of her spear as she swung it as she stepped out of her father's skull. And so now Zeus is rolling there on the floor, putting his head back together. And Athena is standing there in the center of the throne room, staring down every single god into place. And this was her introduction to Mount Olympus. Because see, what had happened was Zeus had eaten Metis, but she had survived. Just like Demeter and Poseidon and Hades and Hestia and Hera had survived being eaten by their father as infants, she survived being eaten by her husband. And she'd stayed there inside Zeus, setting up space up inside his head, living rent free inside Zeus's head. And she was pregnant when she went in. And she was still pregnant. And time passed, and eventually that baby had to come. And Metis knew there wasn't room for the two of them inside Zeus's head. So she got ready for her child to come out. And she figured that child might need to come out fighting, so she made armor. She made a breastplate. She made a helmet. She made a shield. She made a spear, all for her daughter, Athena. And everyone, as they realized what happened, they went, "Oh, what does this mean?" But that's when Metis whispered in Zeus's ear from inside his head, because she decided to stay there and just chill. She'd want to be out with all the drama. She said, "If you had talked to me, you fool, I could have told you. You weren't going to have a son, you were going to have a daughter. And the oracle said, if I had a son, that son would rise up against you. Meet your daughter, Athena, and give her some respect now." So that's how Athena's born. She's the goddess of wisdom because her mother was the goddess of forethought. She sprung out of her father's head. And she's the goddess of war because she came out armed, armored, and ready to kick butt. And she very frequently did so. And in fact, she usually won. In part because Ares had his sidekick, Eris, the goddess of discord, the goddess of strife, the goddess of arguing. Athena had sort of a sidekick too, and her name was Nike, the winged goddess of victory. So it kind of tells you something about Athena and Ares as gods of war. Because each of them had a sidekick, but one sidekick was good at causing more fighting, and the other sidekick was good at winning. You might pray to Ares if you needed to survive a bunch of bloodshed or cause a bunch of bloodshed. But if you wanted to win a war, if you wanted to come up with a strategy and tactics that were going to get you through, Athena was the one you prayed to. And so, she's a goddess of wisdom. She's the goddess of war. And there's one other thing that she's kind of famous for being the goddess of. And that's weaving, making cloth. And the reason she is so famous for this is she's the one that invented it. She is the one who invented weaving. She's the one who created the concept of the shuttle and the loom and turning thread into cloth. And that's a pretty important thing to give to the humans. If you think back to the story of Poseidon, how he had wanted the city of Athens to be his, and he got into a competition with Athena. Poseidon gave them a saltwater stream. She gave them an olive grove. She gave the better gift. Weaving is another example of her giving a great gift to humans. And she took great satisfaction in the number of humans who became excellent weavers. Until one day. There was a young woman, barely more than a girl. And her name was Arachne. And Arachne was a human. And she was an excellent weaver. She knew it. Everyone knew it. She got a lot of attention for it, and she loved the attention. Nothing wrong with that. But she was an excellent weaver. And because she was so excellent, she bragged about it. And at first, what she bragged about was the fact that she was the best weaver in her family. And she was. Then she started to brag about how she was the best weaver in her part of town. And she was. And then she started to brag that she was the best weaver in the whole town. And she was. And nothing wrong with owning your own excellence. But remember what I said. There is a certain crime that you can commit in Greek myth. And that is the crime of hubris, of overwhelming pride. You need to know your place. And so her boasting grew. She boasted that she was the greatest weaver in all the area around her. Then she would say that she was the greatest weaver in all of Greece. And at this point, a certain goddess heard this boasting and was paying attention. And so she noticed when Arachne said, "Not only am I the greatest weaver in all of Greece, I'm the greatest weaver in the world. I'm the greatest weaver alive. I'm the greatest weaver ever to exist." And that's when she crossed the line. Now, in all fairness to Athena, most other gods, that line would have been crossed several boasts ago, and the girl would have been blown up by a lightning bolt, her town flooded by a tidal wave, or swallowed by an earthquake. But no, that wasn't Athena's style. And so she appeared in the girl's village. And she said to the girl, "Oh, little girl, little human, I think you may have made a mistake. I think you might accidentally have said that you are the greatest weaver ever. And I just want to give you a chance to take that back now." And Arachne looked Athena up and down, from the toes of the sandals to the crest on her helmet, the shield in one hand, the spear in the other, and said, "I've got nothing to take back because I am the best, you gray-eyed." And Athena said, "Te calmas, o te calma, little girl, child. You have crossed the line. But wisdom. I am the goddess of wisdom, and someone who is wise learns from their mistakes. I want you to get the chance to learn from your mistakes. So let's have a little competition, you and me." And Arachne said, "Fine, whatever, I'll win." Athena took a deep breath, decided not to split the girl in two with her spear, said, "Fine, we'll meet at dawn tomorrow. You set up your loom, I will bring mine. Whoever weaves the best tapestry by sundown is the winner." And Arachne agreed. And so the whole town got ready. And they helped her set up her loom in the village square. And at dawn, Athena appeared, and her own loom appeared in the village square as well. And they began to weave. Now, if you don't know what a tapestry is, it's sort of like a cross between a blanket and a painting, because it'd be a large piece of fabric with some sort of artwork or scenery or decoration sewn into it. And they were very, very popular once upon a time. And the goddess and the girl each started weaving their own tapestry. And they wove and wove and wove as the day went on. And the sun began to dip on the horizon. And at a signal from the judge of the competition, they stood up. And first the townsfolk all came over and looked at Athena's tapestry, and it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. It was the history of the Olympians in all of their glory. There was Zeus striking down Typhon. There was Demeter causing the crops to grow. Poseidon striding through the seas. Apollo, bright as the sun. Artemis, glowing silver in the moonlight. Hephaestus, working with the Cyclopes, crafting marvelous things. It was a beautiful homage to the Olympians. And it was gorgeous beyond belief. And all the townsfolk oohed and awed. And Athena said, "This is done. Why don't you go look at the little girl's tapestry?" And the townsfolk did just that. They went over to Arachne's loom and started to look at her tapestry. And they laughed. They started with a couple sniggers, a couple snickers, a little chuckle. And Athena said, "Oh, the poor little thing. They're laughing at her because they see just how horrible hers is compared to mine. But as she listened to those laughs, the tone of it didn't strike her quite right, and she noticed that some of the townsfolk were actually kind of looking nervously in her direction. So she walked over to that tapestry, and it turns out Arachne had done a tapestry about the Olympians as well. But hers wasn't about how great they were. They made fun of Hera for having a husband who wasn't faithful to her. They made fun of Zeus for having to run away as a baby. It showed Hera and Poseidon and the other original Olympians being vomited out of their father. And it made fun of poor Leto being stuck on the island, unable to give birth. And it showed Poseidon as the worst parts of fish and the worst parts of human. It showed Hades being so pathetic that he had to kidnap his own wife. It was a whole tapestry making fun of the Olympians. And Athena looked at it. She nodded her helmeted head. And she looked at Arachne and said, "Oh, little girl, you like to weave? You can weave forever." And she snatched the shuttle from Arachne's loom and struck the girl across the forehead with it, knocking Arachne to the ground. And as Arachne fell to the ground, clutching her head began to shrink, and her skin began to grow dark, and her body began to swell and bloat, and her arms got long and bent and dark and twisted, and more sprouted out of her, and her legs stretched out too. And as her body grew larger and distorted, it also grew smaller and smaller and smaller, until she scuttled across the ground, up the side of a building into a corner, and began to weave her web. And Arachne became the first spider. And if you take that word, that name, Arachne, and you look at the scientific name for a spider, which is arachnid, it's another link to Greek myth. And someone who has arachnophobia has a fear of spiders. And that comes from actually two gods. Well, two stories of the gods. Arachne, that girl that was turned into a spider, and Phobos, god of fear. Arachnophobia. There are more stories of Athena. She's going to show up in more places. For instance, she'll show up in the story of Perseus and Medusa. And she's actually kind of key in the story of Medusa, but I'm going to save that for the story of Perseus. She shows up in the Trojan War and other places as well. But I'm almost out of coffee, and I think that's where I'm going to leave it for tonight. So, have a good night.